The first slap echoed through the crowded cafe so loudly that every conversation stopped at once. Coffee cups froze halfway to waiting lips, chairs scraped against the floor, and dozens of strangers turned to stare at me with instant judgment. My face burned, my ears rang, and before I could even understand what had happened, the woman standing in front of me looked into my eyes with overwhelming hatred that suddenly melted into complete confusion. Her trembling hand slowly dropped to her side, and her lips barely moved as she whispered, "You're not him." In that single moment, embarrassment, mystery, and heartbreak collided in a way I could never have imagined. I had entered that cafe expecting nothing more than an ordinary afternoon, but I walked into a story that would change two broken lives forever. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and the incredible power of second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another emotional journey like this one. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Every eye in the cafe remained fixed on me while I stood there completely stunned. I wasn't angry as much as I was confused. The woman looked as if she had seen a ghost. Her face turned pale, tears instantly filled her eyes, and she took a shaky step backward. She kept staring at me as though she was trying to convince herself that I wasn't the person she believed I was. Then, without saying another word, she turned and hurried toward the exit. Something about the fear and sorrow in her expression stopped me from simply forgetting the incident. Most people would have brushed it off as an unfortunate misunderstanding, but there was a pain in her eyes that seemed far too deep for a simple mistake. I hurried outside and found her sitting alone on a nearby bench beneath the gray afternoon sky. She had buried her face in her hands and was crying silently. I approached carefully, not wanting to frighten her even more. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, and the shame on her face was impossible to ignore. She apologized over and over again, explaining that I looked almost identical to someone she had spent years trying to forget. Every detail, from my hairstyle to the way I walked into the cafe, reminded her of the man who had destroyed her life. She admitted that when she saw me smiling while checking my phone, she became convinced fate had brought him back into her path. She introduced herself as Elena, and although she clearly wanted to leave, something inside her seemed desperate to finally tell someone the truth. She explained that several years earlier she had fallen deeply in love with a man who promised her forever. He was charming, attentive, and seemed incapable of lying. Everyone around her believed they were the perfect couple. They dreamed of buying a home together, starting a family, and building a peaceful future. Then, almost overnight, everything collapsed. He disappeared without warning, taking not only their savings but also every promise he had ever made. He left behind unpaid debts, unanswered questions, and a woman whose trust in humanity shattered completely. The betrayal had followed her into every corner of her life. Friends slowly disappeared because they grew tired of hearing about the heartbreak. Family members encouraged her to move on, but moving on was never as simple as people imagined. Every unfamiliar face reminded her of him. Every crowded place made her anxious. Every unexpected phone call filled her with fear. She had become a prisoner of memories she never wanted to relive. Seeing me that afternoon had triggered years of buried pain, and before logic could catch up, emotion had taken control. As she spoke, I realized this encounter wasn't really about me. I had simply become the reflection of someone else's worst nightmare. Instead of feeling insulted, I found myself feeling deeply sorry for her. I accepted her apology and suggested we sit together for a few minutes. We returned to the cafe, where the curious customers quickly lost interest and resumed their conversations. The awkwardness slowly faded as we talked like two strangers brought together by the strangest coincidence imaginable. Over the following weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about Elena's story. We exchanged numbers, mostly because I wanted her to know there were still decent people in the world. Our conversations remained simple at first. We talked about books, favorite foods, old movies, and childhood memories. Slowly, the heavy shadow surrounding her began to lift. She smiled more often. She laughed without immediately apologizing for it. Little by little, she started believing that not every man who looked familiar carried the same darkness in his heart. At the same time, I discovered that helping someone heal often heals hidden parts of yourself. My own life had not been perfect. After losing both my parents within a short period, I had buried myself in work and isolated myself from meaningful relationships. I convinced myself that staying emotionally distant was safer than risking another painful goodbye. Meeting Elena reminded me that pain could either build walls or build bridges. It all depended on whether we allowed fear to control us. Months passed, and our friendship grew stronger. We volunteered together at a local community center, helping elderly people and serving meals to families struggling financially. Watching Elena comfort complete strangers showed me a side of her that betrayal had never managed to destroy. Beneath all the hurt remained a compassionate woman determined to make someone else's day brighter, even when her own heart still carried invisible scars. One rainy evening, after finishing another volunteer shift, Elena received an unexpected phone call. Her expression changed instantly. The man she believed she would never hear from again had returned. He wanted forgiveness. He claimed he had changed. He insisted he regretted everything. For a brief moment, I saw the same fear from the cafe return to her face. Old wounds threatened to reopen. She asked me what she should do. I didn't tell her to forgive him or reject him. I simply reminded her that forgiveness should never require forgetting self-respect. Real change is proven through consistent actions, not emotional speeches. The decision belonged to her alone, and whatever choice she made should protect the life she had worked so hard to rebuild. A week later, she told me she had met him one final time. Instead of finding closure through revenge or anger, she found peace by realizing she no longer needed his approval, explanation, or apology to move forward. The person who had once controlled every painful memory had become nothing more than a chapter in her past. For the first time in years, she walked away without looking back. Ironically, the slap that had humiliated me in front of an entire cafe had become the beginning of something neither of us expected. It didn't become a fairy tale built on romance alone. It became something far more meaningful. It became proof that strangers sometimes arrive exactly when life decides our hearts are ready to heal. Some people enter our lives through laughter. Others arrive through misunderstandings. What truly matters is what happens after that unexpected first meeting. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to support the channel by liking this video, subscribing, sharing it with someone who may need hope today, and leaving a comment. Your support helps us continue bringing real, emotional stories that remind people they are never alone. Special request: before this story ends, please comment with the words, "Kindness always wins," if you believe one compassionate act can completely change someone's life. Today, whenever I pass that same cafe, I no longer remember the sting of the slap or the embarrassment of dozens of strangers staring at me. Instead, I remember the lesson hidden inside that painful moment. We never truly know the battles another person is carrying. The angry stranger standing before us may actually be someone desperately trying to survive memories we cannot see. Sometimes the greatest gift we can offer isn't revenge, pride, or judgment. Sometimes it's patience. Sometimes it's understanding. Sometimes it's simply choosing kindness when life gives us every excuse not to. That unforgettable afternoon taught me that healing rarely begins with perfect circumstances. Sometimes it begins with confusion, tears, and mistakes. Sometimes the person who hurts us the most in the first 5 seconds becomes someone who reminds us that compassion is stronger than resentment. And if one unexpected encounter in a crowded cafe could restore faith to 2 wounded hearts, then perhaps every ordinary day still holds the possibility of an extraordinary miracle waiting just around the corner.